I'm recording my homily for the third Sunday in Ordinary Time. And this one's a little more difficult for me because it's actually just a review from last week. So because I'm in 5 parishes, sometimes I have the opportunity to use a homily from the previous week for a whole new audience because I didn't see those people the previous week. So I wrote up a little bit more for the sake of those who just want to view this on YouTube. Now, just the gospel for this week. So the gospel is a little bit of a carryover from last week. So you remember last week in the gospel how Jesus was coming to John at the Jordan River, right? And John calls Jesus, and he doesn't say, "Hey, Jesus," or "Hey, Messiah," or "Hey, Son of God." He says, "Behold the Lamb of God." It's the only time that I'm aware of that anyone in the entire Bible is ever referred to as the Lamb of God. And so there's something very peculiar about it, something very particular. And then I talked a little bit about that last week. Remember that? And so just as a little bit of a review, last week I talked about how you have fear and you have love. And so the opposite of love really at its root is fear, not hatred. Hatred is more of a symptom of fear. And I use some examples of fear and how we can use fear in our world and how it can be very powerful. And so Hitler is just the perfect example. He was a mastermind of fear. And so the fears that his parents had taught him when he was very young and that he had learned from the culture. See, our cultures teaches us lots of things. And for him, one of those things was fear. And so the fear was that there was an entire population that was to blame for all the bad things in Germany. And so that would have been the Jewish population. And so Hitler takes that and he uses that as his, I think you say his motto. He uses that as his rally cry for rebuilding Germany. But it's all out of fear. And so in the end, he's able to convince an entire nation that killing 6 million Jews is something that they're going to permit. Or they're going to be too afraid to stop him, right? And so it was just, he manipulated fear all over the place. Now, love, being the opposite, is where, so okay, let me back up. In fear you sacrifice the other, right? Remember my example of the spider? I don't like spiders. I'm afraid of them. That's the reality. I can say I hate them, but it's because I'm afraid of them. And so I sacrifice the spider so that I can overcome my fear, right? Squash. The spider's gone, fear's gone. Hitler did the same thing, right? That's what he did. He wanted to eliminate his fear, so he eliminated the people. It's a horrible, horrible thing. That's what we as human beings do when we are motivated by fear. We have to watch ourselves today too, right? Because we have modern day examples of that. In racism, to blame another race for all our problems. That's fear. That is not Jesus Christ. That is not love. Okay. Love is where you do not sacrifice the other, but it's where you sacrifice yourself. And remember last week, that's how I tied it in with Jesus as the lamb. He didn't come as the lion to sacrifice the other, to conquer, to destroy the other. He came as the lamb. And the lamb, the key for the lamb though, is that this lamb is courageous. This lamb comes humble, out of love, very vulnerable, appearing to be weak, but full of courage, okay? And so the lamb enters and comes in. Now, and that's why, we have the cross. There's the lamb being sacrificed, the flesh and the blood of the lamb, but of the Lamb of God, not of an animal, but of Jesus Christ. So he calls us to model that in our own life, to be the lamb, courageous, but coming always out of love. Always out of love. You know, I've mentioned this book before, and I've talked to other people about the book. I've given the book to a couple people, and they don't seem to have liked it as much as I have. But I really like it. And so the book is called Overcoming Lukewarmness, Healing the Soul's Sadness. It has really spoken to my heart, and it's really kicked me in the rear, too. And so, reading the book, one of the things he talks about is that when we're in love, we're willing to take any risk for the sake of that love, right? We'll do anything for that love when we're really in love. But when we're not, when we're lukewarm, when our love belongs to something else, even doing the smallest thing becomes nearly impossible. Why is it so difficult to get to Mass on Sunday? Why is it so difficult for Catholics to come to Mass every single Sunday when it's 1 hour? Because they're not in love, right? But when you're in love, you can walk 10 miles on Sunday to go to Mass, which is what people do in some very poor nations because they're in love. They have nothing, but they got love. I should correct grammar. They have love, right? Just in case my mom is watching. Okay, so that's the nature of love. Now, as I was thinking about that, the willingness to take risk, does that bear out when you read the New Testament? So every morning at breakfast, I have my little New Testament there, and I've been slowly reading my way through Acts of the Apostles, and I read about a chapter a day. And so right now, I've just gotten to the part where Paul has been converted. And so Paul was out sacrificing the Christians, right? He was persecuting them. But now Jesus comes to him and he says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Right? I am Jesus. Why are you persecuting me? And so he has this conversion. Now, Paul, I'm not quite there yet, but I'll be getting there. Paul is going to risk everything constantly. He's going to be in shipwrecks. He's going to be stranded. He's going to be beaten. And so anybody who would see that would say, he's in love. I mean, there's no doubt he's in love. Now, Peter in Acts of the Apostles, same thing. He doesn't care. So I had just read that he was imprisoned in Jerusalem, and then they released him because Gamaliel, remember the Pharisee Gamaliel, kind of convinced him to release him. He's right back in the temple area preaching. I mean, no fear at all. But it's not out of hatred. It's not out of revenge. It's simply love. And so he truly is a lamb, and he's going to be arrested again. Out of love, right? So John the Baptist, look at John the Baptist's life. The reason he's killed is because he would not let go of one simple moral issue. The leader of the people was committing, as we would term it, adultery, right? He was with somebody who was not his wife, at least recognized by the Jewish people. And John would not let it go. You know, today, somebody committing adultery, two people shacking up, living together before marriage, it's like no big deal, practically, right? John would not let it go because he knew that if he let it go, it was just this slide, right? If the leader of the Jewish people can commit mortal sin and live in a state of sin, it's only a matter of time before everybody starts doing that. You ever thought about why it's so tragic when we allow our leaders and our idols, the people that we look up to, live in a state of sin and do nothing, say nothing? What happens? Natural consequences. We follow in their example. So John would not let it go. So he ends up becoming the lamb. So that's where we pick up today. Now, in the gospel today, Jesus hears that John has been arrested. Now, I think Jesus knew what was going down. He knew what was going to happen. John is arrested. He knows he's going to be sacrificed. He knows he's going to be killed. Handwriting's on the wall. And so I almost think like Jesus was like taking the baton, right? To be the next lamb. John passed the baton on to Jesus. So John is now going off to be the lamb. Jesus is now going to carry the baton to become the new lamb, and if you will, the lamb to fulfill all the lambs. If you look at all the prophets down through throughout our salvation history, at some point they were always sacrificed for the message of God. They became the lamb. So Jesus takes the baton. He's the next one. Now, what does he do? As soon as he hears that John is imprisoned, he goes north. Now, you can imagine the Holy Land. You have Jerusalem, right? And then north you have Galilee. So Jesus heads north into Galilee. Now, Galilee traditionally for the Jewish people was a land of darkness. And I don't mean sun, like the sun kind of darkness, but moral darkness. That's where sinful people lived, because those were the people that had abandoned God. The land of Zebulun and Naphtali, a land of darkness, a land that had forgotten the light and where to find the light. And so Jesus, as this new lamb, as the Lamb of God, as the light for the darkness, he heads north. Now, I think there's a reason for this, right? Obviously, because love is born in darkness. It's like the seed. You take a seed, you don't plant it in nice, pretty soil or nice, pretty sand. Like you don't go down to the beach, right, and get nice sand and use that for your garden, because nothing will grow in it. You use dirty, ugly, mucky soil that's wet and gooey and just slimy and all those things. And you want earthworms and you want all those. And so you put your nice little seed into the gunk because the seed needs it. That's how love is born. And so if we're a seed, if we're like a lamb, a seed, we need to go into the darkness in order for love to be born. That's the nature of self-sacrifice. That's the nature of everything that we participate in every Sunday at the Mass. That's Him on the cross, right? Where was I going with that? My brain, my poor little brain. I'm getting too old. Anyways, okay, so he goes north. So he goes into the darkness, kind of like this seed, right? He doesn't go into the darkness, as like, I'm Mr. Hero and I'm going to conquer and everything like that. It's very humble, right? He goes in as a lamb, but he goes in to save, right? But before he's going to do that, he's going to call light out of the darkness. And you say, well, that doesn't happen. Well, with Jesus it does. He calls light out of the darkness. He creates light within the darkness. And so he creates the church in the gospel today, in a sense. He goes to the land of the north, and then he looks for his followers. He looks for the ones who are going to carry the church on, for another 2,000 years, at least up to our day. And so he's walking along the Sea of Galilee. He's in this land of darkness, and he finds Simon and Andrew and James and John. I mean, the future of the Catholic Church is being born in this darkness. They become the new seed, the new lambs that will then take the baton from Jesus and carry God's grace and carry His love and carry the gospel. It's counterintuitive on so many levels. When we look for leaders, we look for the most educated people, right? And give a little example. In my last parish, we were developing our own faith formation program, which was going to be intrinsically dependent on the parents, because the parents were going to do all the teaching for their kids. We would simply provide the format and the program and the support for them. And as we did that, some people got angry because they didn't like the fact that they now had to teach their children. And I'll take the blame for it if we didn't implement it in exactly the right way. But anyways, so we got on the radar of people who monitor faith formation in the whole diocese. And they started calling my staff and asking them. And one of the things they asked them was, what are your credentials? You know, how are you creating this faith formation system when you have all these professionally canned programs, professionally made canned programs out there, made by people with PhDs? How can you possibly create your own program? And you know what? I was so proud of my staff, because they were not qualified according to those standards. They did not have master's degrees in theology. That's not why I hired them. I hired them because they were disciples. I hired them because they were in love with Jesus. They were like Peter and Andrew and James and John. They were fishermen before, but they had a love for God. And they had the ability to then transmit that love into something that could be passed on. Kind of like a seed, right? Being planted, and then from that comes light. So just kind of carrying this theme through, right? In your own life, just be reflecting on things. Is there things causing darkness around you? Don't be afraid. You know, be the lamb. Don't see yourself as going into battle against other people, because they're not the enemy. We go into battle, we do have an enemy. His name is Satan, right? We go into battle, but we go into battle as a lamb. As a lamb that finds our example in the image and likeness of the Lamb of God. All right, God bless.